Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Giving you all something a little bit different this week. I'm kind of redoing an old video that I made a while ago on the channel. Little tutorial on my favorite jetliner to fly, the MD-80. So this tutorial is going to be just through cold and start, right up to takeoff. I'll kind of walk you through everything I do. I'm by no means claiming to be an expert, but every time I fly this plane, what I do gets me up in the air. So if it helps you out, please don't forget to leave a like or subscribe for more flight sim content. And if there's any other tutorials having to do with the MD-80 or any other planes you want to see, feel free to comment down below. And if I'm able to do it, I'll do it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in the cockpit and get this thing rolling. Alrighty, so the only thing I've done so far is just turn on the tablet and make sure weights and everything are plugged in. We're planning a flight today from Dallas to Tulsa, and everything's in kilograms. I think it's a bug with this plane. I can't switch it to pounds, so we're not going to deal with that. But the first thing we can do is we'll jump over here to our aircraft services and let's go to ground and get the GPU on. So we're going to need that. And then we'll come up here and get the plane on ground power. So what we will do, flip on the ground power, turn on the battery and click it twice. The second time you click, it turns the knob and locks it. And then we kind of just follow a flow here. So we're going to come down the left side of the panel, galley power on, emergency lights, seatbelt signs. Here's our ice protection. So we'll get the ice protection on capped mode. Then we'll come over here, anti-ice and anti-fog for the windshield. We'll get that turned on. Lock the flight deck door. And then we should be good up here for now. There's different tests that you can do, like stall tests and things like that. I usually don't mess around with those. But there's plenty of tests that you can run if you want to. But this is just going to be a tutorial to get you up in the air. So from this point, we have power to the airplane. We'll jump down here to the FMS. This FMS, if you've ever used a Boeing FMS, very similar. Very, very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and get this programmed. I'll speed it up a little bit in the video so you can follow along and watch. But if you know how to use the FMS on the 737, the PMDG 737, you'll be able to figure this out easy peasy. So we'll get this programmed and then I'll jump back with you. Alright, so I'll show you guys how to use this takeoff performance calculator real quick. Sometimes it's a little bit buggy, but most of the time I can get it to work. So we'll put in our airport, DFW. We're going to take off runway 17 right. So we got to click through this. 17 right. All this here can stay 0. It's dry. We'll use flaps, optimum. And then we'll put in the winds here. The winds at DFW are 180 at 9. 0 at 9. Plug that in. The QNH 1013 is going to work fine. Like I said, this is in kilograms for some reason. Even though we're in the US, going to have to transpose there because I cannot, for the life of me, get this tablet to go back to pounds. Outer air temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. Pretty hot here in Dallas. Packs on, anti-ice off. And then we'll go grab our takeoff weight from the weight and balance. Grab our Takeoff weight 57826. Go back here. 57826. Get that in there and hit calculate. And there we go. We have all our speeds here, so we can pop these speeds in. We have 141, 146, and 155. 41, 146, 155. Awesome. So that is the FMC all programmed and everything. We'll jump over here and get our cruise altitude put in 230. Would be a shorter flight, so we're not going to be climbing up too terribly high. We have our V2 speed here, so we can tune our speed bug to 250. You don't put V2 in this, you'll put 250. And then if we come down here, we can click on these little slides here and they'll go to our speeds. So we have V1, VR, and V2, and then our clean speed here. So that is this panel, the MCP, and kind of our 6-pack here set up. Now if we jump over here, we're going to be using flaps 2 for departure with a selected temp of 50. So let's take care of the flaps first. If we jump down here to our center panel, you see over here for our trim, we'll put in flaps 2, and then we'll jump back into our weight and balance and make sure our zero fuel weight, 13.4, and we have that there. So setting our trim, we need to make sure these middle notches and these two knobs are lined up. Like so. There we go. Then we'll jump over to our dial a flap, and we'll give ourselves flaps 2 for departure. That way when we put our flaps down, we'll have slats, and then we'll have flaps 2 as our next notch. Now we'll put in the selected takeoff temp, and the way you do this is this ART switch. You'll turn that from auto to off. TO flex is what you'll select here. And then you can see in our little screens here, it has 35 degrees selected right now. We'll dial that up to 50. And you see that drops our EPR limit. So that is good there. And with that, we can go ahead and get the APU started. So we'll jump up here. We'll get some fuel pumps on. And I hold the APU master switch to start until we see the APU dial start moving up. So we're just watching that dial, and there it goes. The APU is starting. Alrighty, so our APU is started up. We'll go ahead and get things set up for engine start. So we'll jump up to the top panel here. Make sure our APU is on the bus. Make sure the blue lights are on under APU bus. That should be good. We need to make sure we turn on the APU air so that we have air to start the engines with. And that should be good. Then we'll jump back down here. And you have to make sure you turn on the pneumatic crossfeed valves, which are these two knobs down here. And that way air goes to the engines. So that is good. We'll jump over to this hydraulics panel, turn on our aux hydraulic and our trans pump, and get those on. Then we'll turn on our beacon light, the anti-collision light, and make sure that is on. And with that, we are ready for pushback and engine start. One thing I did forget though, make sure you turn on your standby artificial horizon. Just press this knob, hold it till it stops moving, press it again, and then it'll line up and be activated. So we'll get the pushback going, and I'll walk you all through how to start up these engines. All right, we are ready for pushback. Made sure all of our ground stuff is disconnected and doors are closed. Everything is good there. Our beacon's on, so we'll go ahead and release the parking brake.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
And we'll wait for the pushback to start. We're rolling back, and we'll start these engines. So for this, System A is what we're going to use. The fuel pumps are on, so we don't need to use the start pump. Go to the right engine. And using your scroll wheel, don't click it or else it'll just snap back. Use your scroll wheel, scroll down once on right engine start, and that'll start the engine. Now what we're looking for down here is this N2 page. We want this to go above 20% before we introduce fuel. So we're going to watch this rise. And 21% looks good. Introduce the fuel. And we're going to watch our panel here, make sure nothing goes into the red or looks crazy as the engine is starting. Our EGT's rising up good, N1's rising up, N2's rising good. Our EPR isn't going to move too terribly much. As you probably saw there when the panel lights clicked, our power bus switched over to the engine. So we're going to let everything stabilize here till it all looks good. EGT is going to keep rising a little bit as the engine gets running. I think we'll call that a good engine start on the right engine. So we'll pop up here, scroll that back up, close the guard, and we'll get the left engine started. It'll be the same thing. Scroll down.
Set parking brake.
We'll set the parking brake as well. Watch our N2 rise up to above 20%. We have our N1 starting to rise. EGT is going to start rising when we get that fuel introduced. There's 20%, 21%. Introduce the fuel. And we'll make sure we have a good start here. Watch everything rise. Make sure everything's looking good. What we want to watch for is anything shooting over into the red. What you can also watch is your warnings up here. And as you can see, as the engine starts running, our warnings are start going off.
Tow truck disconnected. Bypass pin removed.
So there we go. Same thing with the right engine. Everything here is stabilized.
Right is clear.
So we'll go back up here to our start valve. Scroll it up to turn it off. Close the guard. And we'll leave our ignition over to System A for takeoff. So everything is good. Engine is started. So we're good there. We'll jump to our overhead and start getting everything set up for our flight. So we can go ahead and turn the APU air off. APU off, and we'll turn on the packs, which are these switches here to get air to the cabin. Just like so. And that is pretty much everything we have to do in the overhead. So now we'll jump over here and get the plane set up for takeoff. We'll arm the speed brake. And we'll select flaps 2. So there's slats. And there's flaps 2. We can check our flaps notches here. Looks like we have about flaps 2, so that'll work. Fun thing with the dial-a-flap is you can select any flaps that you want to for takeoff, and the EFB will give you different ones depending on airport conditions, which is kind of fun. After the engine start, we can come down here, turn our pneumatic crossfeed valves off, flip our auto brake over to takeoff. We cannot arm that yet because the parking brake is set. So as soon as we start moving, we can look down there and arm the auto brake for takeoff. Everything here is looking fine. Our trim is set, flaps are set. And coming up through here, everything's fine. We'll get the flight directors on for departure. And now we are ready to taxi. Not a ton to do in the taxi. Release the parking brake. Turn on our nose light. We have a master caution, which is ART in op, but we know that's an op because we set a flex takeoff temp. So that is good. Now that the parking brake's off, arm our auto brake. And now it's just a matter of taxiing out to runway 17 left here at Dallas Fort Worth. All right, we're coming up to the runway here. We'll do a little bit of a takeoff briefing and everything like that. We'll get set up for the takeoff. So we're taking off. I'll walk you through how to set toga power and everything. I'll get you to where we are on nav and VNav. I'll get you to that point. We're going to climb out of here at 400 feet AGL. So when we reach about 1,000 feet, we're going to flip over to nav on takeoff. Once we reach about 1,500 feet to 2,000 feet, that's when we'll go to climb power and start working on accelerating, getting the plane cleaned up and good to go for the climb up to our cruising altitude. But getting things set up for takeoff, we'll make sure our transponder is switched to TARA, especially if you're flying on VATSIM. You need to squawk mode Charlie. Get our bright lights on. We can go ahead and turn on our strobe lights. Keep in mind the strobe lights on this plane are automatic. They don't turn on until the wheels are off the ground, which is kind of nice. So you can really turn that on as soon as you want to. You won't be flashing everybody with strobes. We'll say we're cleared for takeoff. So we'll turn the wing landing lights on. Next thing we need to do is we need to come down to our throttles and press our toga buttons, which are these buttons on the back of the throttle. Press those in. And in our annunciator screen here, we have takeoff, which is what we want to see. That's good. We'll get lined up here. Just confirm our master caution is the ART, and that is fine. So now it is time to take off. So we're going to stand the throttles up to 50%. Once they're stabilized, we'll flip on the auto throttle, and that's our takeoff. It'll set our takeoff power from there. Now that we're ready to go, get the throttles to about 50%. We'll let the engine stabilize. There we go. Off the brakes. And toga. You see it's working our throttles up.
Takeoff thrust is set.
Takeoff thrust is set, which is what we want to see. A little bit of forward pressure on the yoke. Keep our nose wheel on the ground till 80 knots. We have clamp, so it has our takeoff power locked. There's 80 knots. Release that forward pressure on the yoke. And we'll keep rolling. We're going to use a long takeoff roll today since we're using reduced power and a low flap setting. So we're going to need a lot of speed, but we have plenty of runway here. There's our V1, hands off the throttle. And there's our rotate. So we'll start pulling back lightly to about 7 degrees. Pull back just a little bit more. We're off the ground. We'll get the gear up, positive rate. And we'll meet the flight director. We got a nice steep climb out here. There's 1,000 feet. Let's hit the nav button. You can follow our nav track. And we'll keep climbing up here just through 1,500 feet. Let's go climb power. There's our climb power. Now we'll start working on accelerating here and flying our flight director. So, flight director, in terms of our vertical profile, not the most accurate in the world. Let's see, if we go ahead and switch over to VNav, it'll probably drive our nose into the ground to accelerate here eventually, or it's going to keep us at a very steep angle of attack. So I usually just manually accelerate. We're above our clean speed, so we can bring our flaps and slats in. So I just manually let the plane accelerate. Once we get closer to 240 knots, which is what's given us our VNav speed, then we'll meet the flight director and get the autopilot on. I know a lot of flight simmers like turning on the autopilot immediately. You can, and you can use vertical speed to kind of control your climb. I don't like doing that. I just like hand flying it. I find hand flying the most interesting. Most fun you can have in flight sim. Coming up with another left-hand turn on departure. So meet the flight director, keep accelerating. We're getting to about 240 knots, so we'll pull our nose up. Start working our way up to the flight director. The flight director should start correcting here before too terribly long to our VNav climb. What we can do is, one thing you're going to notice with the autopilot, sometimes it's a little bit wonky, so I'll go ahead and turn on the autopilot. You see it yoinks our nose straight up. And we're bleeding speed. But what it's going to start doing here is it'll start correcting. Let's hit VNav again. So you can see there, it bumped our speed up a little bit. And it's starting to ever so slowly pull the nose down. You see our vertical speed is dropping. So when you're flying this plane on your own, just be aware that the autopilot, it's not as precise as like a 737 or an A320, especially on takeoff. When you're just following the magenta line and you're just flying, it works just fine. But you got to be aware that sometimes it's a little bit finicky, sometimes you just got to work with it. And you can see now we're leveling out. We're at 1,000 feet for our vertical profile, and we're starting to accelerate back up. So that's just something to be aware of when you're flying this plane. But now that we're off the ground, disarm the speed brake, turn our auto brake back to off. We can go ahead and arm ART again. Let me just double check and make sure that actually armed, which it did. ART is armed. So that's good. We'll turn our nose lights off and keep our landing lights on until we're above 10,000 feet. Jump over here. All the lights over here are good. And this is the point where you're just flying the flight plan, talking to ATC if you're on VATSIM. And the plane is, for the most part, flying itself. So this is the point where, you know, if you're flying a 737 or an A320, it's your first time flying this plane, you're probably used to this. It's managing the speed, it's managing our climb, it's managing our navigation, our left and right lateral navigation. Everything there is golden. Now it's just a matter of climbing out. And there's DFW Airport right there where we just left from, that runway right there. 17 right. And from here on out, it's just flying the plane up to cruise. The rest of the flight, you're not going to touch this climb or this thrust mode selector here. You don't have to put it to cruise or anything. You just leave it on climb the rest of the flight. Kind of like how with an Airbus, you leave the throttles at climb for the whole flight until you land. So that is pretty much it when it comes to the MD-80. And in terms of taking off, so if there's any other tutorials with this plane you want to see, I'm sure people will be interested in a landing tutorial. I'm actually time crunched right now, so I won't be able to do this full flight and get the landing for this flight. But if you all are interested in the landing tutorial or tutorials with other planes or any other kind of flight sim videos, please do not hesitate to drop a comment down below. I read every comment. I try to reply to every comment, so don't be afraid to drop a comment. If this video helped you out, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you're into flight sim. But until next time, you all stay safe, stay healthy, and I will catch you all in the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you later.